And it says we are live.
Oh, jolliest of jolly goods.
Jolly good. Once again, we are live, kids. Today we are absolutely thrilled and honored to carve out some time with this super busy Hollywood legend who's made it really easy for us to connect with him. God bless him, because he's traveling all over the place. Our guest today was born Patrick Alan Lilley in Inglewood, California, just up the block. And he is known as professionally as Butch Patrick. He began acting at just 7 years old, landing early roles on General Hospital, The Real McCoys, Bonanza, and Mr. Ed. But it was in 1964 that he made television history when he was cast as Eddie Munster on the classic CBS sitcom, The Munsters, one of everybody's favorites. With his Widow's Peak, Velvet Knickerbockers, and deadpan delivery, Butch became one of pop culture's most recognizable child stars. Following The Munsters, Butch starred in Sid and Marty Krofft's psychedelic kids series Lidsville, and later released the novelty rock single Whatever Happened to Eddie, with his band Eddie and the Monsters. Like many child stars, he faced challenges off-screen, including addiction, but in 2011, he embraced sobriety after a prostate cancer diagnosis and has become a vocal advocate for recovery and resilience, and in his honor, we're not tippling today. So Butch is not just a nostalgic icon, he's a cultural preservationist. He owns and curates themunsters.com, and he's currently touring the country with his summer Scream Tour, appearing at classic drive-in theaters with screenings, live Q&As, and his custom Dragula coffin car. He's on a mission to bring people back under the stars and back together. Plus, in this month now, because we're in July, 12th and 13th, we'll see him as the star guest at Paracon, a paranormal convention in Waterbury, Connecticut. And you can find out more about that at ParaCon.org. He is truly on the road again. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to TeaFlix Tuesdays, the original Eddie Munster, Mr. Butch Patrick.
Hello.
Welcome, welcome.
Welcome,
Wow,
Butch.
what a fabulous intro. Thank you so much.
You're absolutely welcome. When I asked you a few minutes before we went on air, what part of the country are you in today? Tell the folks how your morning's gone so far.
Well, I had a drive-in last night in Erie, Pennsylvania, and it was a torrential downpour, so we never done one in the rain before, and it worked out very well. Luckily, I bought a bunch of plastic sleeves for pictures and this and that. But this morning, my GPS took me a little bit of the wrong direction, so I'm rushing because I had to leave Erie to get to Cleveland to drop my girlfriend at the airport. I'm now in Toledo, and after this interview, I have to make it up to Michigan by about 7 o'clock to see the next event will be on July 10th, but we're doing some promos up there today about a monster truck jump or a Munster truck jump, and also a sledgehammer, a contest, a sledgehammer, a hearse. So yeah, I'm pretty busy.
A sledge. I've never honestly expected to hear the word sledgehammer and hearse in the same sentence.
No, very unusual.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you started acting at the age of 7, I hear. So what do you remember about your first roles on like General Hospital and the Real McCoys? Was it fun? Was it intimidating, or just another day in Hollywood?
Well, I was kind of an unusual kid. I was always wise beyond my years. I always was more comfortable with adults than kids. I was pretty sharp where I could memorize lines, and I was very good back in the old math with flashcards and mathematics and drew division and this and that. So when the opportunity came up, I just literally went on a car ride because my mom had an interview, a photography shoot for my little sister, because our dad was kind of an influential guy around this town called Gardena. It was the only place back in the 50s and 60s that you could play poker in Los Angeles. And he owned a couple of the casinos. So the mayor, the job of mayor was up for grabs, and Mr. Firstman wanted to be mayor. So his wife thought a good way to get the endorsement would be put Michelle into the movies or get her some exposure. And, she was a very cute little girl, and I went along for the ride that day. What happened was my sister never really caught on, but the guy took a picture of me, and kind of like the Lana Turner Schwab's, pharmacy story, he put it in the window of his photography studio on Hollywood Boulevard. And about 2 months later, a producer and a director happened to be walking by, and they were casting a movie, and they were still looking for the youngest kid, Eddie Albert and Jane Wyatt. So it was called The Two Little Bears. They've reached out to the photographer. He said he's not an actor, but you can reach him through this agent, Mary Grady, who at the time was the world's first child-only agency. She was just starting out an agency from an adult agency, specializing in kids because her son was Don Grady from My Three Sons.
Right.
So my mom asked me on the phone, would you like to go on an interview to maybe be in a movie? And, she's like smiling, like hoping I'll say, yeah. So, well, as being the 7-year-old analytical kid that I was, I go, what's in it for me? Well, if you get it, she goes, you'll spend about 6 weeks at a studio and you won't go back to public school, which I kind of found boring because I was kind of like doing work beyond my second grade level. So it worked out really well. We went on the interview. I told them I had no experience. I read the script. I acted properly, apparently, and they hired me. And by the time that 6 weeks was up, I had pretty much learned how the business worked as far as knowing your lines, hitting your marks, interacting, the basics, sort of like a crash course. And I did a commercial for Kellogg's. And then after that, we got the thing for General Hospital, which was the first episodes ever I was on, like for the first month.
Oh, really?
Wow. And General Hospital, there's a small loop there. My first husband, my ex-husband, was the music supervisor in later years, won many Emmys for his music on General Hospital. So we must be cousins then.
Yeah.
We must be related somehow.
Something.
Well, what worked out well was basically the intimidation factor a lot of kids have. I didn't have. And I was younger. I acted older than I was mentally, and I looked younger than I physically was, which is a perfect recipe because they love it when you can play 8 or 9, but you're actually mentally like 15 or 16.
Yeah, that's great. So did you think at that point you realized that acting could be a lifelong gig and being a personality and being a celebrity? Or was it just a childhood sort of rip and not having to go to public school?
My plan was to do it till I was 18 because I was well aware of the child labor laws. So my plan was to do it till I was 18 years old, make enough money to buy my race car. I had a plan. And then the only thing that really came into play was everything was going along. I lived about 25 miles away from Hollywood, and I was probably only went on about 20% of the interviews that Mary called up for. Because after school, my mom would get the call and then she would go looking for me. And I never, one day I might be riding my mini bike or a dirt bike. And one day I might be playing football at the, here and there. So half the time she couldn't find me. And the other half of the time I was in the process of doing something that to me was more important. So I wouldn't go on the interview. But when she did find me and the traffic, you're driving through traffic, I would go up to Hollywood. But I had a dual life. I was a regular kid doing regular stuff, not telling my friends about the Hollywood stuff because I really felt uncomfortable in the spotlight, but I certainly appreciated it when I did it. It was very neat, going on the studio and the whole process of making movies. And we all watch TV and we all watch movies, and here I am firsthand seeing it and being on TV, but still being the regular guy back home.
That's wild. So Angie had a question about your character Eddie that you're best known for.
Do you remember your audition for the Munsters? Is that still clear in your memory?
Yeah, and I'll tell you why. It wasn't. I never really went on the audition when that series was being cast. I had gone to Illinois with my grandmother, and I was living with her in a little town called Geneseo, Illinois, going to parochial school. Believe it or not, in the 5th grade. My mom was going to marry a ball player who was a Roman Catholic, and she had been divorced. So through that thing, we were all trying to appease the Catholic Church. So she was going to lessons and I was going to parochial school, and the church turned it down anyway, so it never worked out. But what happened, they had already cast the show. They had shown it to the networks. The networks greenlit it, but they said, we don't like the kid and we don't like the mom. So they got Yvonne DiCarlo to come in as Lily. And then my agent, Mary Grady, said, I've got the perfect kid for you. And they said, look, we've looked at every kid in Hollywood and, we know he's not here. And she goes, that's the key. He's not in Hollywood right now. So she showed him some episodes of the Real McCoys that I did the last season of a very popular series called the Real McCoys. And they said, oh, he may work. So they flew me out from Illinois to a screen test in Hollywood where I got off the plane. My uncle picked me up. My mom had already left for Washington, D.C. with my ball player father who got traded, stepfather. So there was nobody in L.A. I went to the studio, got the part, and they said, make arrangements to report to work. Now, my family's in the East Coast.
Oh.
Uncle put me on the couch for a few days, and we hired a woman to drive me to work every day. And then as it turned out, they doubled up. They put 2 of the sons in one room. They gave me a room. And then I basically lived with my uncle for the next year and a half. Flew back to visit my mom about once a month.
Wow.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
you were 11, 12, 13 years old and flying across
That was
country
just-
by yourself?
Well, yeah, that flying by myself, yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
the 11-year-old thing was the way it worked out really well is to go from the airport to the studio and you go directly into a scene with Yvonne DiCarlo. That's why I remember it so vividly, because it wasn't the normal process.
No.
Right. So, I mean, Eddie became such a cultural icon, still is to this day. What was your fan response like back then? I mean, obviously nowadays we have social media, but were you getting a ton of fan mail? Did they give it to you at the studio, or because of your age, you just weren't exposed to all that?
They gave it to me, and they also picked out to this day still the most popular picture of Eddie holding a Woof Woof doll, and they gave me about 5,000 postcards, rubber stamp that said "Best wishes, Butch Patrick," and I would get these bags about once every couple of weeks. There would be maybe 500 letters, and I would basically stamp them, and sometimes I would put a little notation on it, and that was my fan mail, and it was pretty good. Like you say, there was no social media. I did a few personal appearances, not a lot. I remember going into Phoenix one day to the Thomas Mall with a gentleman named Bob Burns, who was in a big gorilla suit named Kogar. They thought Eddie should have a gorilla. And I actually put my own makeup on the plane flying from LA to.
Oh, my goodness.
So I did my own makeup that day. I was about 11 years old, and we had the 5,000 kids show up. And there's a picture of me at a table with a security guard here, Kogar with his head off over here, and then the guy with the microphone. And there's just a sea of kids like this. I'm looking like.
That's wild.
Wow.
Our friend Ashley in Alabama is asking. He's like, how was it working with Yvonne and Fred and Al? I mean, did they eventually feel more like family than big stars to you? Or?
They were always very good to me, and it's funny because I spent so much time with them, more than my own family. It was a very weird dynamic. All of the cast had kids about my age, which was nice. Fred Gwynn was Superman, a super very nice guy. He also wrote children's books, illustrated children's books. Music, was very patient, and Al Lewis was Mr. Sports. He loved sports. He knew my stepdad was a pro ball player, so he took the time to toss a baseball with me or a frisbee, and taught me a lot about life outside the studio. Where Fred Gwynn, who played Herman, we had so many scenes together that they developed these father and son shows. I learned a lot about acting from him. They both basically taught me about don't ever trust the suits. In the studio, they were the actors, they were the enemies. So you're not heavy-handed, but they always told me that not everything is as you may perceive it to be. And then Yvonne Carlo was a major movie star who carried herself and got the respect that she deserved as a movie star. We were all a bunch of TV people.
Right. Oh, that's right. Because back in those days, there was a great divide, but it was snobbery between film and television, wasn't there?
Yeah.
The movie stars didn't do television. It was literally considered beneath them. And until the Taylor did a General Hospital, it was like she sort of broke the ceiling.
Wow, that's amazing. Elizabeth in Pennsylvania is asking, do you still have a Wolfie doll?
I do. He's out in the truck. I almost brought him in, but I was running late. How I wound up with Wolfie is a very funny story. The show was over. I went home. I didn't have him. About 5 years later, I went out to Universal to do an Ironside. And the prop master, Eddie Keys, was about 80 years old when we were doing the Munsters. And the last person I expected to see still working at 85 out there was Eddie Keys. And he walked up to me and I said, "Oh my gosh, Eddie's so great." He had a restaurant across the street right out the gate called The Key. We would all frequent for lunches when we would leave the lot. And anyway, he says, "I don't want you to leave without seeing me. So I got something for you." And he gave me a box. He says, "Don't open this till you get home, and don't open the trunk if they ask you to look at it, your trunk leaving the lot." Luckily, the Scotty, the gentleman that used to be the guard at the gate, was still there. So he knew me from the Munsters, and he didn't ask me to stop and look in the trunk or anything. And when I got home, he gave me the original Woof Woof doll.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible.
Amazing.
What an amazing time in your life, right?
Yeah.
But you decided you were going to act until you were 18, right?
Yes. That's right. I mean, after the Munsters, you worked on Lidsville, and even you released music, didn't you? As Eddie and the Munsters. Monsters. Yeah. What inspired the track about, it was called Whatever Happened to Eddie?
Yeah.
Or what?
how it worked out was after the Munsters, I did a lot of guest starring roles, and whatever was the show of the flavor of the month. Adam 12s and Marcus Welby's and the Monkeys Christmas episode was a great week for me because of the Monkeys being so big and so hot, and it was like that to me that was probably the best week of my life. I was in the 8th grade. I normally never told anybody at home what I was doing, but that particular week after I did that show, I let everybody know that I was going to be on the Monkeys Christmas show, and to this day I think it's one of the best shows they ever did. I certainly love it. But I did 9 episodes of My Three Sons, which was a very strong reoccurring regular there. I did the more guest starring episodes than any male. I think Meredith McCrae did 11. I did 9 as a guy, but that was really good because I was working with Don Grady, and Mary Grady was obviously my agent and his mom, and I actually lived with Mary Grady and Don Grady a couple times when I was out working and my mom was still on the East Coast. So I got to know Don very well. Wonderful guy, great musician. And then I was never a musician. I would have liked to have been a musician, but I never really sat down and learned it properly. I had a bass, I had a Hofner, I had a P bass, but I just played around with it, and I never took it seriously enough to be an honest musician. But I really knew a lot of rock stars and musicians, and I admired what they did.
Yeah.
And when MTV came on the air, I thought I'd be a great VJ. So I was lobbying for the VJ role, but they already picked their days. But we thought, well, let's make rock videos. That seems like a cool medium that we could get into. I have a background in movies, and my producer he was a great bass player with Stuart Copeland in an old group called Curved Air back in the day, and they got rid of Phil and hired Sting and then formed the Police. So we decided to do a video to make rock videos, and I wrote the lyrics to Whatever Happened to Eddie. And we shot that at one night for $3,500 with about 60 guests and 3 locations. So we pulled it off. And the neat thing about that was it was the first unsigned act ever to be on MTV without a record deal, which led to a show called The Basement Tapes, where they started taking in applications and submissions from people that had a band and a video, but they didn't have a record deal. So I'd like to think that maybe we helped a few people achieve their dreams.
I'm sure you did.
Absolutely, because indie music in those as hard as it is now, it was even more impossible then because you didn't have Spotify and YouTube and all of that.
It was totally pay for play back then. It really was.
Yeah, you had to have a label and a manager and a deal, and $250,000 for a video. Remember?
But what we pulled off was amazing. Not only because we slipped it in a low budget, got it in, and the early days of MTV were so cool. The videos were just so rough around the edges, but they told a story, and it was fun, and it looked like something you could do yourself, which you could back in the day.
Right. So was it challenging at that time in your life? Were you aware that you were stepping out of Eddie's shadow into all of these other guest shows and then eventually music and so on? Did you miss Eddie?
I hadn't done anything Munster related since the Munsters Go Home movie. What came back to me was in 1979, a friend of mine had Marina Del Rey had a shop on Washington Boulevard, and he called me up and he says, "Butch, they're shooting the Munsters across the street to my shop." And I go, "No, they're not." And he goes, "Yeah, they are." And I drove down there, and sure enough, there's Fred and Al dressed up as women, as waitresses from the movie The Revenge of the Munsters. And I went over and kind of joked with them, and they recognized me immediately, and we reconnected. And right at the same time that happened, I did Whatever Happened to Eddie, and I was on the East Coast doing something, and I needed someone on the West Coast to introduce the band, and Al Lewis stepped forward. But up to that point, Whatever Happened to Eddie, I had done nothing with the Munsters whatsoever. So the key to it was we needed to do a video, we needed a hook. So that's how I re-grasped the Eddie Munster character. And at that point, we brought Al Lewis back in, and we started doing personal appearances, and then we brought Pat Priest back into the mix. So back in the early 80s, a lot of the comic book conventions and that kind of market was just starting to get foothold, and the Munsters fit very well into it because it was multi-generational, family friendly, and it took in the best of Cars from George Barris, the music, the Monsters from Universal Studios. And that's kind of how we all got together again.
Wow, that's wild. So if your friend hadn't seen them shooting, who knows what, right?
Absolutely.
It's crazy. We had an author on a couple of weeks ago who's written a book called What If about the Beatles. What if Paul had never met John? And, you go down all of these rabbit holes. So the universe is an amazing thing when it wants you to do something.
I mean, and on that note, first of all, they offered the role to Bill Mumy, Will Robinson from Lost in Space. Bill Mumy was the greatest kid actor probably ever. I mean, there's Margaret O'Brien and Freddie Bartholomew and this and that, but for the sheer number of the amount of work and the body of work, Bill Mumy, and an artist and a musician, he took the role down. So I'm living in Illinois. Had he taken the role, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
No.
And then, in addition to that, they hired a guy that basically got turned down. So I was really like the third guy in line and living 2,000 miles away. So sometimes, like you say, yeah, the perfect storm or the universe works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
And presumably through all of this time, you were still in party mode. You were still doing all the Hollywood silliness, right?
Well, that's one of the reasons why when I turned 18, I told him I was going to quit. I did Lidsville the summer I turned 18. What it really turned me into the party animal that I was is the summer I turned August 2nd, 1969. I turned 16. I had just finished doing a Marcus Welby pilot. They just landed on the moon. I got my new Mach 1. I took a friend of mine up for an interview for a movie that was going to be shot in Brazil. And I took him up to the interview. And when his interview was over, I was sitting in the waiting room and the producer spotted me and he goes, "You got a minute?" I said, "Yeah, I brought him." And he goes, "Rick, sit down." And I went in and basically I wound up getting the part that my friend went up for.
Oh dear.
4 days later, they rushed to a passport for me. And 4 days later, the month after I turned 16, I'm in Brazil in Bahia, Salvador, Bahia. And there from September to December I got the third lead in a movie called The Sandpit Generals, which was based on a very famous book about the street kids that live and band together for survival on the streets of Gamato. And it was a very famous book, kind of like, sort of like, I don't know who would be the contemporary, but I can't think of a contemporary. But anyway, I'm down there for 3 months. All I have to do is show up for work in the morning, which I did. And at the end of the day, I could do whatever I wanted to do. And you're 16 in another country with money and the access to kids across the street from the Pan American School. I befriended them. They had been down there for months and years. So we went out every night and partied. And basically, that's how my sister told at my first year chip ceremony when I got sober. She says he left as Richie Cunningham and he came back as John Lennon.
That is wild. Yeah.
So what happened was when the movie was finished, it was a very, very, very well done movie, and it was supposed to be released. And I was up for Academy. They had for your consideration, Butch Patrick, Best Supporting Actor, Billboards on Sunset in 1970, very much like the Quentin Tarantino movie, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. That period going on. My girlfriend lived at the top of Laurel Canyon. Charlie Manson had been running around this summer, so the movie never saw the light of day because the force of Hall Bartlett and Rhonda Fleming shelved the movie because she got half the rights to the movie, and he was so mad at her that he never released it to make sure she never made a penny.
Oh God!
People that missed out were the people that benefited from the release of the movie, like myself. And so I went from potential movie star to Lidsville Saturday morning.
Wow.
This was enough. I'm nothing against Lidsville. I'm nothing against the Crofts. But when you're thinking you're going to be a movie star, you're going to get an Oscar, and then back on Saturday morning, I had pretty much had enough. Plus, in my mind, I already said I wasn't going to work past 18. So that all came together, and I just pretty much, and the fact that I was partying and drinking, I really wasn't going on interviews with showing my best light.
Right.
No. Yeah. Well, you've spoken obviously really candidly about your struggles with addiction and your journey to sobriety. What helped you turn the corner, really? And what does wellness look like in your life today?
Well, I had been a functioning alcoholic drug addict for 40 years, decades and decades and decades.
Really?
And one thing, I was always pretty smart, so I figured out ways. You got to be, some of the smartest people are people that have issues, because you got to not only fake, you not only have to figure out a way to support your habit, you still have to kind of hide it from those that need it hid from.
That's right.
You're leading a Jekyll and Hyde life, no doubt about it. And all the spending on it, it's like if you spend $500 a day getting high, that means that's another $500 a day you're not making. So you really have to come up with ways to keep the plate spinning. It went on for 40 years, and I finally met some people. A good friend of mine in high school, he got sober, And every once in a while, I would reach out to him after a bender, and I knew something had to change. I mean, I knew I couldn't continue this way. And finally, after like 40 years, I woke up one morning in a place I shouldn't have been with, I still had some money, so I wasn't broke, but I said, I think I hit bottom, and I reached out, and someone made a phone call, and the phone call they opened up the Yellow Pages in California, and rehab centers or treatment centers, and they opened the page to a place called Oasis Treatment Center, just out of the blue. Made a phone call. The woman that answered the phone, Stacy Creasy, they said, I got a child actor who wants to get sober. Can you help him? And she was, oh my gosh, you need to speak to Jim. And Jim A was the owner and proprietor. And he always wanted to try to get a kid actor sober if he could. And the reason being is he was the original interventionist from A&E.
Oh.
When A&E asked him, that somebody showed up for the show sober. Off the plane, they were sober. And A&E producers wanted him to get him drunk so they could film him drunk at the intake. And Jim says, no, he shows up sober, he stays sober. And he wouldn't play that game with him. So he quit being the interventionist. So we spoke. I spoke to Jim. He says it's $35,000. He goes, you probably don't have that. I said, I don't. He goes, I'll sponsor you, but I doubt if you're going to make it. But I'll roll the dice on you because my father enjoyed the Munsters. He always called Herman. He was German, Herman the German. So he took me in. I flew out, got on a plane. Two of my best friends flew with me. Sponsored the plane ticket, made sure I got in the intake, and I basically didn't plan on staying, like a lot of people don't. I was appeasing those that wanted me to go in. I didn't think I needed help. I knew I needed help, but I didn't want it this way. So I kind of willingly went in, but I figured I'd be there a month tops.
Right.
And what happened was I started learning about why I was doing what I was doing, and it wasn't weakness, and it wasn't this, and it wasn't that. It was basically disease, and you have to educate yourself to how to combat it and get your tool belt and this and that. And I love the education process. And once after 6 weeks, I was going to leave. Was fed up with it. They take you to the porch. They talk you down off the shelf. And after that, about 2 months in, I got it solid. And I've been picking up chips for the last 14 and a half years. November 21st will be 15 years.
Congratulations.
Wonderful.
That's such a wonderful thing. And it's I'm nearly in tears. It's such an inspiration to people. I bet when you do these conventions and, fan meet and greets and stuff, you must hear from fans that you've been an inspiration to them and you've taught them a lesson or you've made them think about it or you've helped them get sober. That must feel great.
Yeah, I don't really sponsor people because of my travels. It's difficult to physically sponsor. But what I do, my program, how I work my program, being visible and being honest about it. But what I do, I get a lot of people who today, it's very hard to find a family that doesn't have someone in the family or know of someone in the family that needs help. It's pretty much everybody knows someone. And a lot of people don't know how to take the first step and how to introduce possible treatment or to suggest the first step. I'm very good at that. I tell them, I go, as much of a problem it is, there's also the flip side that right now, because it's such a problem, there's so much help if you choose to want help. And the neat part about it is I kind of explain to them how to nudge them along and not scare them, and not spook them, but get the first step. And I talk with them on the phone if they want to talk. I'm always available to talk or whatever. But I've put a lot of people into the program gently, and a lot of them have done well. And several parents have reached out to me and said, they're still sober. Thank you so much.
Great, wonderful.
Yeah, and then for me, what was interesting when I first got sober, I was doing my thing, and about after a couple, anybody gets sober for a year. That's not sober. That's you're trying, but you're not sober yet. But after about 5 years, I noticed other celebrities would notice that I was 5 years sober, and they would then introduce themselves that they were in the program, and I had no idea. But they weren't going to do it until they were sure I was real. So after that 5-year chip and then the 10-year chip, now once you make 10 years, you're pretty much you're in the deal. It's not a huge number, but it's an honest number. And now that I'm hitting up 15, the one thing I really enjoy is the cool club I'm in, because there's so many very cool people in this world that are sober that had wild lives in the 60s like myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously that it's your lifestyle now. It's who you are, and it's who you are and what you stand for, and that's fantastic. But you've got so much I still want to get to with the screen tour and your paranormal convention next weekend in Connecticut. But because I'm the digital Devo and we run McCartneyMultimedia.com, Angie had a question about the website.
Yes, you own and run Monsters.com, don't you?
Yes.
So how did that come about? And what's it like being the digital caretaker of this beloved franchise, which it surely is?
I am so undigital. I'm so not techie. But what happened was in the early 90s when I moved from California to Florida, I ran into a guy that was kind of a techie guy, and I bought 4 websites at that time. I bought Munsters.com, I bought La La Land, I bought TV Land, and I bought, what was the other one that I had? I had some of Butch Patrick or something. Munsters I kept, Munsters.com I kept. TV Land got stolen from me by Time Warner because they were about ready to launch TV Land. And I accidentally stumbled onto something they wanted. They stole it from me, never gave me compensation. La La Land just lost because the guy forgot I was supposed to pay $100 or something, and he let it go over $100. And I was so mad because La La Land I knew had value. But I always kind of had catchphrases in the back of my brain. I've always been kind of a marketing guy. But Munsters.com has been really good to me because what happened was after I started selling merchandise and pictures on it, after you do that for a couple of years, then you've proven that it's your domain and you've had commerce through it. That means Universal can't come steal it. Now, you could sell it to them, So
Sure.
I kind of figure one of these days, maybe, maybe if somebody is doing something Munster related and they want Munsters.com, I would consider partnering with them or working with them or Universal or whatever. But I just got lucky and bought it a long time ago and just maintained it.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, so if that ever does happen, please feel free to reach out to me. I've been doing this 31 years. We built our first website when Mark Zuckerberg was 9, and we have many, many friends in the domain brokerage business who, they sit on the board of ICANN, which is the Internet Naming Authority. It's the authority of who gets to own what and how much it's worth. They're kind of like the DMV of the whole World Wide Web. So if you ever get into any digital doo-doo, let me know and I'll certainly help you out.
Digital doo-doo, now there's an expression. There's lots of it about, isn't there? Yeah. So what about your summer Scream tour and the drive-in revival? I'm fascinated about the drive-ins.
Well, it's basically being born in 53, I went to some drive-ins in the 50s, all through the 60s. When I was 16, a lot of people like myself in 16, when you get your driver's license, you really can't go bar hopping. But the drive-in movie theater, you can get an uncle to buy you a 6-pack of beer. You can go to the drive-in. You can take your girl. You may not check into a hotel, but it's sort of one of those places for teens to, enjoy being a teenager. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And they were so much fun, and it was just a go-to place. It was part of growing up, Americana. And I always enjoyed them. And since I have the Munster cars and I drive everywhere, it didn't take me long. A couple of years ago, I decided I wanted to do something different. And I always liked the drive-in. So I thought to myself, I go, instead of going to these conventions, and which there's nothing wrong with the conventions, I go, but I'd like to do something unique and different. And the more I started thinking about it, the more I thought, wouldn't a drive-in tour be cool? And then I found out most drive-ins are, on the weekends, they're taken under contractually obligated to show first run movies from studios, so they can't do anything midweek. Some of them have multiple screens and they can, but I sort of targeted the single screens, the older ones, to let them know that if they're not open Monday through Thursday, I would like to show them an idea that I have. Would they be interested in possibly doing special events midweek and getting not only attention and exposure for their property, but maybe actually make a few extra bucks that they normally not. And it's working out really, really well. And so I just did my 6th one. I will be continuing doing it from Pennsylvania. I'm heading into Ohio now, and then I'll be in Michigan, and then down to Indiana, over to Illinois, up into Wisconsin, and then back to Iowa and Missouri. So my plan is to to do this firsthand with people, get to know them, let them know what's up, hopefully leave on good terms, which everybody's been great. Everybody loves what we're doing. And at the end of the season, then evaluate it all. And hopefully I can't continue to do this forever. It's just, to be honest, it's too much work for a 72-year-old man. But I have lots of people who are friends of mine that are in movies that feature cars and this and that and special events. So we're going to work on coming up with a agency that specializes in supplying drive-ins with unique old school monster movies, hot rod movies, any kind of a cool thing that ties into a midweek nostalgia driven thing. And I had to do it firsthand to see if it would work. Now that I know it's working, by the end of the season, I'll probably be have a relationship with 25 to 30 owners, and then they know 25 or 30 owners. So hopefully I'll have an agency that supplies that I can sit back and just do most of my work from making phone calls.
Yeah,
That's wild. And I think when we spoke on our technical test a couple of days ago, our mutual friend Fireball Tim in Malibu, who is Mr. Cars. So I'm sure he would love to help.
I've done his show. It's very weird. There's 400 left out of 4,000. I'm working with 150 that are in the association, but I see that the potential there, and I love the idea that it's virgin territory, and most of the drive-ins that are still left are in rural areas because the land became so valuable. The drive-ins that I went to in LA and stuff, they just, the land, or you'd have to charge $300 a car to come in and see a movie because the property's so valuable.
Right.
But in the cornfields in the Midwest and out here, all these old ones, there was a drive-in for sale, the one that I just did for $650,000, 20 acres, that possibly we're pondering the idea of maybe taking it on. Wow.
And what are you charging per car at your Munster shows?
These special event things, we're charging $13 a car because of the nature of 13 Mockingbird Lane.
$13 a car?
Yeah.
That's
oh boy.
I mean,
that's asking for trouble.
We're doing this as the thing. This is not a huge moneymaker right now. This is an awareness campaign and an introductory meet and greet to draw some people out that are Munster fans, for me to meet the owners, to let them see what I do. Size me up, I'm sizing them up. We're parting ways happily, and everybody says, let's do it again. I'm so thankful that you came out to do this. Well, because they know that I'm not getting rich doing it, but at the same time, it's worth it. I'm making money. We're covering our expenses, and it's working.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, you and I should, when you come off the road, let's have another conversation, because I'm very close with the Visit Texas, Visit Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, whatever. I have a lot of chefs, and we even represent a fabulous guy in Fort Worth with a lobster and grilled cheese food truck. So you could have food truck movie night. We could put a bunch of chefs together.
The property is so valuable. The property has such potential that you can do jamborees, you can do weekend festivals, you can do food festivals, you can do a lot of stuff with a private property. And that's what I really enjoy, because it's really the possibilities are pretty much endless.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then the in between all your summer scream stuff, you're going to visit our dear friend Charles Rosenay in Waterbury, Connecticut on the 12th and 13th of July. Tell us a little bit about Paracon.
Well, Paracon, I met Charles. I've known Charles for a long time. I had a pretty sized Beatle collection back in the day. I've been to a few of his Beatle things. I've never done the Magical History Tour, although I did go to Liverpool with a convention for tattooing, a tattoo convention as a guest, and I did my own little Magical Mystery Tour. But for Charles, I also went on his Drac tour to Romania and Dracula's castle. So Charles and I have definitely, he's a very dear friend of mine. He was very kind. He said, Butch, I'm only going to have one special guest, and I'd like you to be there. And I said, of course, Charles, for you, I'd be happy to be there. And when I was a kid, my grandmother, who was I living with when I did the Munsters, when she moved to the new house in Macon, Missouri, another small town, she bought a big old 1875 Queen Anne house that was very, very haunted. So I took it upon myself to buy that house a few years ago to save it from the wrecking ball for Grandma's memory. And as I was leaving, my sister, who knew the ghost and had interaction with the ghost, said, say hi to Miss Ruby. And I go, who's Miss Ruby? She goes, the ghost. She goes, you don't know that house is haunted? I go, no. So anyway, it turns out to be a haunted house. I go there. I had paranormal investigators come in. We've seen the ghosts on camera. People in the town all know about the ghosts, but the ghosts never made themselves present to me. I never saw an apparition. So I did live in a haunted house and a paranormal community. I've done a lot of stuff with them, and I do believe in ghosts. No, I mean,
Fascinating.
what was that?
Fascinating.
Yeah. So I mean, we have them on camera, and I've all the orbs when we come back from a trip, and one thing led to another. It was built on a vortex, so it's very active. And but although I never saw one, I have them on tape, and I'm gonna be at the Paracon, and I love the idea of working with Charles and doing anything that comes his way.
Oh,
And
Charles is wonderful, isn't he? So energetic.
I have a bunch of friends in Connecticut, New York. So yeah, this is fun. I'm looking forward to it.
And for our viewers if you watch this before July 12th, you can see going across the bottom not only themunsters.com, but Paracon with 2 N's because it's Connecticut.org. Yep. And you'll be able to meet Butch in person and do a meet and greet and talk all things Munsters and what have you. So thank you so much for making the time. I know you've got a long drive ahead of you, so I don't want to keep you too long. But as our regular viewers will know, that our very special guest, Angie, is known as the Limerick Lady. She has a book out called Mrs. McCartney's Liverpool Limericks and Other Random Irish Haikus. So we have constructed your very own personal limerick. So if you're sitting comfortably, then we shall begin. Are you ready, madam?
Absolutely.
And a 1, 2, 3. A young lad named Butch stole the screen with a widow's peak frightfully keen. As Eddie he howled, while the monsters all scowled, the cutest werewolf that we've seen. From dragsters to drive-ins he tours, reviving old theaters outdoors. With fangs and some flair, he brings monster-sized care and nostalgia that always endures. Ta-da!
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. That is so kind. I love it.
I'll send it to you.
Please do.
I will email it to you. Yeah. So, folks, do spread the word. themunsters.com. There's some fabulous stuff in the store over there. And if you happen to see on the events page that Butch and his Munster movies and saving the drive-ins and all that Americana love is coming to town, please go and spend $13 and take a carload of your craziest friends.
Thank you.
All right, kids. Thanks for taking the time.
Bye-bye.
Lots of love. Bye.
Bye.